What if the smallest person in a village held the power to change the fate of an entire world? Imagine a tiny stranger from the stars who arrives with nothing but courage and a mysterious machine, ready to face a fierce enemy no one else dares. Stand against. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now let's jump into the story. On a quiet morning in the village of Eldara, a small child named Leora walked hand in hand with her mother, Nara. The sun was soft and warm, casting a golden glow on the peaceful streets. They were on their way to a special place in the village, a quiet garden with a small statue standing alone in the center. Leora looked up at the statue, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Mother," she asked, "what is this place?" Nara smiled gently and said, "This is a memorial, my child. It's a place where we remember someone very special." Leora's gaze went back to the statue, which was no taller than she was. "But why is the statue so small?" she asked, tilting her head. "It's not bigger than me." Nara sat down on a nearby bench and patted the spot beside her. "Come, sit with me, and I will tell you the story of why this statue is here," she said softly. Leora eagerly sat down, her small legs swinging as she listened closely. "Long ago, before even my grandmother was born, something strange happened in our world," Nara began. "One day, a bright fiery ball fell from the sky and crashed not far from here. It burned the land where it fell, and the fire was unlike anything we had ever seen before. Our bravest warriors went out to see what had happened, but even they were too afraid to get too close to the fire." Leora's eyes grew wider as her mother spoke. Then they heard a scream coming from the burning land. It was a cry for help. But none of the warriors dared to go near the fire. Instead, it was the youngest elder in the village, a brave man named Kian, who stepped forward. He walked into the burning fields without fear and found something small and weak trapped in the fire. Nara looked down at Leora and said, "That small creature was not from our kind. It was a human." Leora furrowed her brow in confusion. "A human? But how could someone so small help all of us?" Nara smiled and explained, "At first we thought he was just a pet, someone's animal. He was so tiny compared to us. But he was not a pet. He was a person like you and me named Joran." The villagers carried Joran gently to the wise healer of the village. She tended to his burns and wounds, working carefully to help him heal. Days passed slowly, and at first, Joran was too weak to even speak. The villagers watched him closely, unsure what to think. They worried he might die, and if he did, they feared the one who sent him might be angry with them. But Joran was tougher than anyone expected. Slowly, his strength returned, and he began to watch the village with quiet curiosity. He listened when the villagers spoke, and though he could not speak their language at first, he learned quickly. One day, the wise healer was startled when Joran spoke a word. The villagers did not understand it, and the word was soon lost to time, but it was enough to prove that Joran was not just an animal but a thinking, feeling person. The elders and warriors were amazed. It took time, but they came to accept Joran as one of their own. He told them about his world, a place far beyond the stars, where he had traveled in a flying ship. He said he was an engineer, a builder and fixer of things, though they had never heard that word before. Joran explained that his ship had crashed by accident, and he was lucky to be alive. He thanked the villagers for saving him. Leora listened intently as her mother spoke, imagining the tiny human arriving in their village. From the sky, "Did Joran help the village?" Leora asked. Nara nodded and continued. "The elders asked Joran to help them. They hoped he could make their tools better or bring more water to the village. But Joran told them he was not the kind of engineer who worked with simple tools or water pipes." The villagers were puzzled, but they did not give up on Joran. They asked him to help with the harvest or make the children stronger and healthier. But again, Joran said he was not the engineer for those things. Instead, He watched the village closely, learning their ways and growing more a part of their lives every day. Then, the peace of the village was threatened. The Varkan, a fierce tribe from the mountains, were known for raiding villages like Eldara. They did not grow crops or care for animals, but lived only by fighting and taking what they wanted. The villagers feared the coming raids, and whispers of war filled the air. When Joran heard the news, he surprised everyone by asking some of the bravest warriors to follow him to his crashed ship, a place he had rarely spoken of. The villagers wondered what the tiny human planned to do. What could someone so small do against a mighty tribe? Leora's heart beat faster as her mother's voice lowered. The day the Varkan arrived, no warriors stood outside the village fields. Nara sighed quietly. Only Joran stood there, next to a strange metal statue he had been building. The Varkan chief laughed at the sight of a small human and a statue guarding the village. He was angry at what he thought was an insult. Joran called out to the chief, telling him to stop and listen. He offered mercy if the Varkan left peacefully. But the Varkan did not understand mercy. They thought it was a joke, and the chief raised his weapon to attack. Then, the statue beside Joran roared with light and power, so bright and fierce that the Varkan chief was destroyed instantly. The battle was fierce. The statue fired beams of light that stopped the Varkan warriors in their tracks, one after another. No one had ever seen such power. The Varkan, shocked and terrified, fled back to their mountains, defeated by a human no taller than a child. Nara looked down at Leora, who was now silent, imagining the tiny human standing brave and strong. That, Nara said softly, is why we remember Joran, because he showed us that true strength is not about size or force, but courage, kindness, and cleverness, and that anyone, no matter how small, can change the world. Leora smiled, feeling something warm in her chest. She looked at the small statue again, understanding now why it was so important. It was not the size that mattered. It was the heart inside. After the fiery battle that saved Eldara, the village settled into a new rhythm. Joran, the small human who had fallen from the sky, was no longer a stranger, but a part of their world. The villagers watched him with growing respect and curiosity. Though he was different, with skin pale and soft and eyes that held the knowledge of distant stars, they began to understand that Joran's strength was not in his size, but in his mind. At first, Joran was quiet, observing everything around him. He listened carefully to the village elders as they spoke in their slow, gentle language. Though the words were strange to him, he was determined to learn. Day by day, he repeated phrases until he could answer back in simple sentences. The children of Eldara became his teachers in many ways, showing him their games and laughter. Their joy was a language he could understand without words. The elders, still puzzled by this small visitor, tried to understand what kind of help Joran could give them. "You say you are an engineer," Elder Rovan said one afternoon, leaning on his carved wooden staff. "But what does that mean for us? Can you fix our plows or make the harvest better?" Joran shook his head gently. "No, I am not the kind of engineer for tools or farming," he replied. His voice was soft but sure. This answer confused the villagers at first. They expected help with crops or animals, but Joran spoke of things they had never imagined. Joran explained that in his world, engineers built machines and devices that could do amazing things, but they were very different from the simple tools of Eldara. The word engineer was new to them, and it took time for them to grasp the idea. But the villagers were patient, and they trusted Joran's honesty. They saw his effort to learn their ways, and in return, they began to teach him about their land, their stories, and their hopes. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, Joran sat with a group of children. They asked him questions about his home and the stars, about the shiny ships he mentioned, and the places beyond the sky. Joran smiled and told stories as best as he could, using simple words and gestures. The children listened, wide-eyed and full of wonder. In those moments, a bridge formed between two worlds, one small human and a whole village learning from each other. The elders soon realized that Joran's greatest gift was not in fixing tools or making new machines, but in the way he looked at the world. He saw problems differently, thinking of solutions they had never considered. The village had long struggled with dry seasons and weak crops, and Joran listened carefully as the villagers shared their worries. Though he could not solve everything, his presence brought hope and fresh ideas. Despite this growing friendship, not all was easy. Some villagers whispered doubts. How could someone so small and strange truly help? What if his ways were too different, too foreign? But time and kindness changed many minds. Joran worked alongside the villagers, learning to respect their customs and sharing what he knew. Slowly, the barriers of fear and suspicion melted away. One day, the elders came together in the village circle and spoke about the future. They wondered what to do if the Varkan warriors returned. Would Joran be able to protect them again? Joran listened quietly and then offered a plan. He could repair parts of his crashed ship and build new machines to guard the village, but he needed their help. The elders agreed to support him, even if they did not fully understand what he would create. As the days passed, Joran became more than a visitor. He was a friend, a teacher, and a protector. The villagers no longer saw him as the strange small human who fell from the sky, but as someone who belonged with them. Leora, the little girl who once sat beside her mother by the statue, now ran through the fields with Joran, learning and laughing. Then came a quiet moment that showed just how much Joran had become part of Eldara. One evening, as the village prepared for the coming winter, Joran spoke a word in their language, something none had heard before, a word that meant hope. Elders nodded slowly, understanding at last what Joran had brought with him. It was not just knowledge or power, but a promise that even in the darkest times, there was light to be found. The villagers began to look forward, no longer afraid of the threats beyond their borders. Joran's calm courage and quiet wisdom inspired them. Even the warriors, once doubtful, came to respect his ideas and strength. The village grew closer, united by the belief that their differences made them stronger, not weaker. One night, under a sky full of stars, Joran stood outside the village, gazing up at the heavens from where he had come. He thought of his home far away, of the experiment that had sent him crashing to this new world. But now he felt at peace. Here, among these simple, kind people, he had found a new purpose. He was not just a visitor. He was a guardian. The villagers knew that challenges would come again, but they were ready to face them together. They had learned from Joran that strength came in many forms, in brains as well as brawn, in kindness as well as courage. The small human who had arrived broken and alone was now their teacher in ways none had expected. As the seasons turned, stories of Joran's bravery and wisdom spread beyond Eldara. Travelers told tales of the little human and the mighty machines that protected the village. But the villagers kept the true story close to their hearts, sharing it with their children by the fireside, teaching them that every person, no matter how small or different, had the power to change the world. Leora, now a little older, would often sit by the statue, imagining what Joran might build next or what new stories he could tell. The village was no longer just a place to live, it was a home where hope and friendship grew. And it all began when a tiny human stepped out of the fire and into their lives, teaching them that acceptance was the key to true strength. In the quiet moments between work and rest, the village of Eldara whispered a simple truth, that to learn from others was to grow, and to accept someone different was to find new hope. Joran's journey was far from over, but one thing was certain, he was no longer alone, and neither was Eldara. Together, they looked toward a future filled with endless possibilities, bound by trust, respect, and the courage to believe in something greater than themselves. The peaceful days in Eldara did not last forever. Rumors began to spread that the Varkan tribe, a fierce and merciless group from the Rocky Mountains, was preparing to attack. The villagers whispered worriedly among themselves, afraid of the coming danger. The Varkan were known for their cruelty. They took what they wanted by force and never showed mercy. Their raids had destroyed many nearby villages, and now Eldara was next. Joran listened carefully to these stories. Though small in size, his mind was sharp and quick. He had spent months learning the language and customs of Eldara, and he cared deeply for the people who had welcomed him. But this was a threat unlike any they had faced before. The Varkan were strong, and their weapons were deadly. The warriors of Eldara prepared for battle, but they knew they were no match for the mountain tribe. One morning, Joran gathered some of the bravest warriors and led them toward the edge of the village, where his crashed ship still lay hidden beneath twisted metal and broken wood. The warriors exchanged nervous glances. They had never been inside this strange machine before, and they did not know what to expect. Joran moved with purpose, explaining that he had plans to defend Eldara but needed their help. Inside the wreck, Joran worked quickly. His hands moved over tools and levers that the villagers had never seen. Sparks flew, and metal creaked as he repaired parts of the ship and connected strange devices. The warriors watched with growing hope, trusting the small human who had already done so much for them. Though they did not understand the machines, they believed in Joran's cleverness. The day the Varkan appeared, the village was quiet but tense. The warriors stood ready, but Joran ordered everyone else to stay inside their homes. No one was to fight except those who were prepared. The Varkan marched toward Eldara with a great battle cry, their weapons flashing in the sunlight. The ground shook beneath their feet as they came. A sea of armor and war paint, moving steadily forward, dotted the village's edge, where the fields met the forest. Only one figure waited, a tiny human standing beside a tall, strange statue made of shining metal. The Varkan warriors laughed and shouted, mocking the sight. Their chief, a towering man named Kordak, sneered and stepped forward, angry at what he thought was a joke. "Is this your defense?" he roared. "A small child and a useless statue?" Joran stood firm, though his heart pounded. He raised his voice and called out to Kordak, offering a chance to turn back. "Leave now," he said. "Go in peace, and you will not be harmed." The Varkan chief laughed louder, unable to understand the meaning of mercy or kindness. To him, these were signs of weakness. Without hesitation, he raised his massive war club and charged at Joran. The moment the chief took his first step, the statue beside Joran came to life. It roared with a sound louder than thunder and blazed with a light brighter than the midday sun. A powerful beam shot from the statue, striking Kordak with such force that he was destroyed instantly. Where he had stood, only scorched earth and smoke remained. The Varkan warriors were stunned. They had never seen such power before, and their cries turned from laughter to terror. Angered and humiliated, they charged forward, screaming in rage. But each time they moved, the statue unleashed another roar and another burst of light. The machines Joran had repaired worked perfectly, defending the village without putting him in harm's way. One by one, the Varkan warriors fell, unable to approach the strange metal guardian. The villagers watched from their homes, hearts pounding with fear and hope. The battle was fierce but one-sided. The Varkan, mighty though they were, could not overcome the cleverness of the small human and his powerful machines. As the sun climbed higher, the surviving Varkan realized they were losing. More than half of their warriors lay defeated, and the statue remained unscathed. With shame and fear, the remaining Varkan turned and fled back to their mountains, leaving Eldara safe once again. Their pride was broken, and their cries of anger echoed through the rocky hills as they retreated. But the battle did not end with their retreat. Joran knew the Varkan would return, and he was not satisfied with a simple victory. He wanted to protect Eldara forever. After the fight, he returned to the statue and worked through the night, fixing and improving the machines. The villagers kept a respectful distance, watching the small human with awe. The next morning, Joran stood beside the statue and spoke a single word in his own language. The statue roared louder than ever before, sending a wave of light and energy out toward the mountains where the Varkan lived. The ground trembled and rumbled as boulders and rocks broke loose, crashing down the slopes like a great avalanche. When the dust settled, the Varkan's mountain homes were buried beneath rubble and dust. Their fortresses and caves were destroyed, and their power was broken. The once feared warriors had been crushed, not by strength or numbers, but by the cleverness of a small human and his machines. The villagers could hardly believe what they had seen. The land was changed forever, the mountains now lower and quieter. Peace came to Eldara, but it was a peace built on the courage and wisdom of one who was small but mighty. Joran walked back into the village, tired but proud. The elders gathered to greet him, but he stopped them with a raised hand and smiled. "That is the kind of engineer I am," he said quietly. From that day forward, the village honored Joran with the small statue standing in the memorial garden. It was a symbol of bravery, cleverness, and hope. It reminded everyone that true strength was not measured by size or force, but by the courage to stand up for what is right and the wisdom to use knowledge for good. The story of Joran's battle spread far beyond Eldara, inspiring other villages to believe in the power of one small person to change the course of history. And for the people of Eldara, it was a lesson they would never forget, that even the smallest among them could protect their home and bring peace to a troubled world. The battle that Joran had fought to protect Eldara was over, but its impact would be felt for generations to come. The village had survived the attack of the fierce Varkan tribe, and the mountains where the enemy had once lived lay broken and silent. The land itself had changed, the tall peaks reduced to rubble and dust, the air heavy with the weight of what had happened. Eldara was safe, but the cost was clear. Many lives had been lost in the mountains, and the scars on the earth reminded the villagers that peace was precious and fragile. Joran walked through the village, watching the faces of those he had fought for. Children played cautiously, and elders spoke in hushed tones about what had been done. The small human who had arrived as a stranger was now a hero, but he did not seek glory. Instead, he moved quietly among the people, helping wherever he could. He repaired broken tools, helped tend to the fields, and listened to the stories of the village with patient ears. One evening, as the sun began to set and painted the sky with soft colors, Joran sat beside her in the memorial garden. The statue, once just a strange metal sculpture, had become a symbol of hope and strength. Villagers often came to sit nearby, remembering the courage of the small human who had changed their world. Children gathered around Joran, asking questions about the stars, the machines, and the battles he had fought. Joran smiled gently at the curious faces. "Strength," he told them, "is not always what you see on the outside. It is the courage inside your heart, the kindness you show to others, and the wisdom to use your gifts for good." The children listened closely, absorbing every word. The lessons of the past were not just stories, but guiding lights for their future. The elders, too, came to understand the true meaning of Joran's presence. It was not just the power of his machines that had saved Eldara, but the message he carried, that anyone, no matter how small or different, could make a difference. They spoke often of how fear and doubt had almost kept them from trusting Joran, but in the end, acceptance had brought them peace. With time, the village rebuilt and grew stronger. The fields were healthier, the homes sturdier, and the people more united than ever. Joran worked alongside the villagers, teaching them about the stars and the distant places he had known. He shared stories of his world, not to boast, but to inspire hope that there was more beyond the hills and valleys of Eldara. Years passed, and the story of the small human spread to other villages and towns. Travelers came to see the statue and hear the tale of bravery and wisdom. Eldara became known as a place of courage and kindness, where a tiny visitor had turned the tide of history. But for the villagers, the greatest treasure was the lesson they learned: to never judge a person by their size, their looks, or their origins. One day, many years later, a young child named Mira sat beside the statue. Her eyes sparkled with the same curiosity that Leora once had. She reached out to touch the cool metal, wondering about the small human who had once stood there. Her grandmother, Alina, joined her, smiling softly. "Do you want to hear this story again?" she asked. Myra nodded eagerly, and Alina began. Long ago, a small human named Joran came from the stars. He was different from us, but he had a heart full of courage and a mind full of dreams. When danger came, he stood strong and saved our village, not with brute force, but with cleverness and kindness. Mira listened, her imagination alive with visions of distant worlds and shining machines. Alina looked at Mira and said, "Remember, every person has a story and a strength inside them. It is up to us to listen, to accept, and to believe that anyone can be a hero." Mira smiled, feeling a warm glow inside her chest. The story was more than just words. It was a spark that would grow in her heart and in the hearts of all who heard it. The village continued to pass down the story of Joran, from parent to child, from elder to youth. The small statue remained in the garden, a quiet reminder that true strength comes from within. Visitors would often ask why the statue was so small, and the villagers would answer with a knowing smile, because great things often come in small packages. Joran himself stayed with Eldara for many years, never forgetting the kindness of the people who had saved him. He helped them prepare for future challenges, always working quietly behind the scenes. His time in the village was not just about machines or battles, but about building trust, friendship, and hope. As the seasons changed and new generations grew up, Eldara became a symbol of unity and courage. The villagers knew that the world beyond their home could be uncertain and sometimes cruel, but they also knew they could face it together. They carried with them the lesson that had saved their village: never underestimate the power of one person who believes in what is right. And so, the legacy of Joran lived on not only in the statue or the stories, but in the hearts of all who called Eldara home. A legacy of courage, kindness, and the endless possibility that anyone, no matter who they are or where they come from, can change the world. In the quiet moments, beneath the wide sky filled with stars, the people of Eldara would look at the statue and remember the small human who came from the sky. They would smile, knowing that courage is not measured by size, but by the strength to stand tall when it matters most. The story of Joran was theirs now, a gift passed down through time, inspiring hope and reminding everyone that heroes can be found in the most unexpected places.